Hello, everyone. We're back and we're starting on page 25, which is where we left off of Zach's lies. So we're starting to find out just a little bit more about what has happened. Why did those men come in the middle of the night? We're starting to get some information on that. What has happened with Zach's dad? Maybe there's some interesting, or Jack's dad. We're going to be kind of going back and forth there for a bit. But what's going on? So we're starting on page 25, and I'll read again for about 15 or so minutes. So we are starting with, I'll just start at the top of the page there to give us a little bit of a review. But yes, Miss Saunders. I believe we've spoken on the phone. He gave her a small nod, then turned to Jack and Joanne. And you must be Joanne. Your father said you were beautiful. He wasn't exaggerating. Joanne rolled her eyes at Jack. And Jack, Bender continued, you look a great deal like your father. Jack did not like Mr. Benjamin Bender. How's Neil? Patricia asked. Have you seen him? I just came from seeing him. He's doing fine under the circumstances. We'll straighten this all out, Mrs. Osborne. As usual, our federal friends have gotten a little ahead of themselves and are abusing their powers. Do you mean Dad didn't do the things they told us? Jack felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was all terrible misunderstanding or mistake. Of course not, Bender said vehemently. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Shall we sit down and discuss our options? When everyone was comfortable, Benjamin Bender opened his briefcase. Before we begin, I have a few questions. What did they take from your house? I have no idea, Patricia said. We left before they were finished. Computers? Yes, I think so. Like I said, I don't know what they took. The house has been stripped, June broke in. I was over there this afternoon. They left some of your personal things. Clothes, books, CDs, toys, some furniture. Things like that. Everything else is gone. Jack wondered if they had found the Jack-in-the-Box. He hoped not. We'll get all your possessions back. Eventually, Bender reassured them. They just do this to harass people. Tell me, did your husband do any of his business from his home? Some, Patricia answered. He has or had a home office where he worked when he was in town. I see. Did they? Who really hired you, Mr. Bender? June interrupted. He turned to her as if he had never seen her before. As I mentioned before, Neil Osborne hired me. When? I don't see the relevance of that question. I think it's very relevant, Mr. Bender, Patricia asked. June has always been our attorney. Neil has never mentioned your name. I'm not surprised, Bender replied easily. We were introduced just recently by a mutual friend. Who? I'm not at liberty to say. But rest assured, he's a good friend of Neil's and is very upset about this terrible injustice. My instructions are to spare no expense trying to help you and your husband. He quickly changed the subject. Has the DEA attempted to interview you formally, Mrs. Osborne? I told them I wanted I wanted to think about things for a while and speak with my attorney first. Very wise, Bender nodded in approval. They will insist on speaking with you, but I can delay them for several days. I'm scheduled to speak with them tomorrow morning. We can't have that, Bender scolded. We have a lot of things to discuss before we grant the interview. I don't see how it can hurt, Patricia said. I don't know anything about drugs. Bender laughed. That's besides the point, Mrs. Osborne. These people can trick you into saying things you don't really mean, and that could get you and Neil into a great deal of trouble. My advice is to... Mr. Bender, Patricia interrupted. I have retained June Saunders as my attorney. Bender's pleasant expression changed immediately. Mrs. Osborne, you and your family are in serious trouble here. I'm sure that Miss Saunders is a good attorney and a good friend, but the situation is very complicated. Having your separate representation is a mistake. As I told you, your husband's benefactor is very concerned about this situation. If anything unfortunate were to happen to you or your husband, he would be very upset. What do you mean, unfortunate? June asked. He continued to look at Patricia. This is a potentially very dangerous situation we are dealing with here. His words hung in the air for several seconds. You can represent my husband, Patricia was firm. That's his choice. My choice, though, is to have June represent me. Perhaps Miss Saunders and I can team up and represent you together. No. I see. Bender slowly closed his briefcase and stood up. Does your husband know about this decision? I haven't spoken with him since this happened. Well, perhaps you should before you make up your mind. I also suggest that you talk to him before you grant an interview to the authorities. He might be able to enlighten you further about his involvement in all of this. I would hate for you to jeopardize yourself or your family. We do not want to cooperate, or we do not want to operate at cross purposes here and get tangled up. This is exactly what the DEA wants us to do, and you're playing right into their hands by seeking separate representation. Thank you for your time, Mr. Bender. Patricia got up and opened the door for him. I do hope you change your mind, Mrs. Osborne. It would be best for everyone involved. He gave her a business card. On the back is my number of my hotel. I'll be in town for a couple more days. One more thing before you leave, Patricia said. Certainly. How did you know where to find us? No one knows where we are. We aren't even registered under our own names. The question seemed to throw Bender for a second, but he recovered quickly. It wasn't that difficult, Mrs. Osborne. Patricia closed the door behind him and turned to June. If he could find us, they can find us. I think they already have, June said. I've got to talk to Neil. I'll call Agent Pelton. Barry Jones and Paul Snyder sat in a rental car a quarter-mile away from the hotel, watching the front entrance through a powerful spotting scope. The car was beginning to sour with the smell of hamburgers, coffee, and two large men who had not bathed in 2 days. The men watched Benjamin Bender go in and come back out 15 minutes later, looking very unhappy. When June Saunders and the Osbornes finally came out, Barry and Paul followed them to the Federal Detention Center and discovered they were not the only people following the Osbornes. Barry called Alonzo Asnar. The cops are tailing him, he said. As I expected, Alonzo said. Stick with them, but make sure you're not spotted. Alonzo hung up and looked out the small round window of the jet. He was the only passenger. The black sky was clear. City lights flickered 30,000 feet below. He flipped the intercom switch and asked the pilot when they would be landing. A week earlier, the pilot would have been Neil Osborne. Alonzo was going to miss Neil. He dialed another number. Benjamin Bender answered the phone in his hotel room. So how did it go? Alonzo asked him. Not very well, Bender told him. Mrs. Osborne has retained her own attorney. I thought you'd be more persuasive. She still might change her mind. I told her to talk to her husband. He might be able to convince her. She's with him now, Alonzo raised his voice. She might change his mind. Bender was worried about this too, but didn't say so. He seems to be with us on this thing, but he's worried about his family and what might happen to them. With good reason. He told me to tell you that if anything happened to them, a certain document would be sent that would put an end to your operation. Alonzo laughed. Bold words from a pilot who knows virtually nothing about our operation. I wouldn't be so sure, Bender said. He gave me an address and asked me to pass it along to you. 1655 North Cumberland, Miami, Florida. Alonzo's hand tightened on the phone receiver. It was the address of one of his many drug warehouses. Perhaps he knows a bit more than I thought. Another thing, Bender said. You told me that Osborne didn't speak Spanish. He doesn't, Alonzo said. He does now, Bender said. This afternoon he conducted our entire interview in fluent Spanish. He speaks it as well as you. He suggested that I let you know. So, we've met the infamous Alonzo Asnar. This Alonzo Asnar is working with Benjamin Bender. What does all this mean? Chapter 4. So it's italicized. This is Jack's writing. After Bender left, June drove us to the federal detention, where they are keeping Dad. Agent Pelton met us at the front door and led us to a waiting room on the 3rd floor. Back to the book now. Generally, Agent Pelton began, we wouldn't allow you to speak to your husband prior to our interviewing you, Mrs. Osborne. But I think it might be in everyone's interest if we stretch the rules a little this time. June nodded. We appreciate you making this exception. I'm assuming there will be no recording devices. You assume correctly, Miss Saunders. We consider this a privileged conversation between husband and wife. Agent Pelton pointed to the chairs along the wall. You and the kids can wait here. He led Patricia down a hall to a metal door with a uniformed guard standing in front of it. He glanced at his watch. You've got 15 minutes, Mrs. Osborne. The guard opened the door and Patricia stepped inside. Neil tried to get up when she entered, but he was hindered by the shackles that bound his ankles to the floor. How are the kids? He asked. Patricia looked at him coldly. Considering everything you've put them through, they're fine. I'm sorry about all this, Pat. Patricia cut him off. We don't have time for that right now, Neil. I only have 15 minutes. She took a deep breath to steel herself against the waves of emotions washing over her. It took all of her strength and will to look at Neil without bursting into tears of rage. All that mattered to her was protecting the children. Has the DEA interviewed you yet? Neil asked. No, but I promised Agent Pelton that he could if he allowed me to speak to you privately. Has Benjamin Bender contacted you? Yes, but I have not retained him as my attorney. Don't. Patricia held up her hand. You are in no position to tell me what to do. I was going to say don't even speak to him again. If he calls on the phone, hang up on him. If he comes to the door, don't open it. This surprised her. She had expected Neil to try and talk her into getting rid of June and retaining Bender. We're not at the house anymore. Don't tell me. It's better that I don't know. Neil looked down at his handcuffs. Did they hurt you? Did they hurt the kids? Not physically, but Joanne and Jack are traumatized, confused. It'll be a long time before they get the experience, if they ever do. And the police? They took almost everything from the house, including the cars. I need to make some decisions, Neil, and you've got to help me make them. Of course, he said quietly. She took another deep breath. Agent Pelton is going to ask about what happened last night. He knows something went on, but doesn't know the specifics. One of the men last night said that he would kill you if we told anyone what happened to us. He said he would kill us too. They'll try. How many were there? 3. They wore ski masks. Probably Barry Jones and Paul Snyder, maybe even Alonzo Aznar. He likes getting his hands dirty from time to time. Who are they? Alonzo Aznar runs a drug cartel. The 2 men with him are his right and left hands. But it would be best for you not to mention their names to Pelton. I'd rather do that myself when it comes down to it. The DEA took all your files and your computer. They won't find anything there. What should we do, Neil? He looked at her for a long time before answering. You should tell Pelton what happened last night. This was not the answer she was expecting. Why? Because I've already told him about it. I don't understand. They were specific about what. It was the only way to protect you and the kids, Neil said. I told Pelton that I will tell him everything he wants to know as soon as I know you're safe. He said he would put you and the kids into the witness security program. What does that mean? Neil looked back down at the table. They'll auction everything off, including the house, and give you some of the proceeds after everything is settled. You'll probably be able to take a few things with you. Then they'll move you and the kids to a new town. Set you up in a small business if you want. You'll have new identities. You won't be able to contact our friends or family. But you, Jacko, and Joanne will be safe. It means you'll have to start all over again, Pat, as if your real past had never happened. It'll be horrible, but it's better than the alternative. Alonzo and his people are vicious, and they have long memories. Patricia couldn't imagine what this would mean for her and Jack and Joanne. No contact with her past? Ever? What about you? I'm not important right now. The only thing that matters to me is you and the kids. We'll see about me later. How much time do we have? Patricia looked at her watch. Less than 5 minutes. Okay, here's what we'll do. I've got to keep up a good front, which means I have to keep Bender on as my attorney. He's Alonzo's man, as you've probably already guessed. When I talked to you last night, I was with Bender. They called his cell phone. If I drop Bender, all bets are off. Alonzo will know that I'm cooperating with the DEA, and it's crucial that he doesn't get wind of this until after you're safe. I'll tell Bender you wanted your own attorney, that I couldn't talk you out of it. I've already gotten word to Alonzo that nothing had better happen to you or the kids. What's going to stop him? I told Bender that if anything happens to you, a certain document will make its way to the DEA, and it will be all over for Alonzo and his operation. That should keep him at bay for a while. And is there such a document? It doesn't matter if there is or isn't. If Alonzo thinks there is, then he won't do anything to you or me until they can figure out what to do about it. This will give Pelton a chance to get you out of town. We'll use June as a messenger. We can trust her. When she tells me you're safe, I'll give Pelton the information he wants. The door opened. Time's up, the guard said. Are we clear on everything, Neil asked. Patricia nodded and stood up. I love you, Pat. I always will. Patricia was so numbed by what had happened she could not respond. You have to leave now, Mrs. Osborne. One more thing, Neil said. I want to see the kids before they put you into the program. It might be my last chance. I'll ask Agent Pelton, Patricia said. I'll ask the kids. Agent Pelton and June were waiting for her down the hallway. "Are you ready to answer some questions for us, Mrs. Osborne?" Agent Pelton asked. Patricia looked at June, who nodded. "I guess so." The interview ended 2 hours later. After it was over, Agent Pelton led Patricia and June to the room where Jack and Joanne were waiting. Patricia stopped before opening the door. "Agent Pelton, I don't know how to put this," she said, "but I'm feeling kind of paranoid staying at the hotel. This whole thing has been so upsetting." "You want protection," Agent Pelton said. "I know it's silly." Agent Pelton smiled for the first time since he had met them. "Mrs. Osborne, you've been under constant surveillance since the moment you left your house. We have 3 people at the hotel around the clock. But Benjamin Bender? Famous attorneys are usually nonviolent." He glanced at June with a grin. "We didn't want to let him know we were keeping an eye on you, so we let him through. But how did he know where we were?" Agent Pelton's smile disappeared. "You didn't call him?" Patricia and June shook their heads. And my timer is going off. So we will continue this tomorrow. Have a good day, guys. Bye.